Yo, this is Solvum. This is going to be a long, slow video log of my current character's progress on the Sanctum Softcore League, so you'll sit back, relax, get some snacks, get a drink, chill out, check out the slash played here real quick. Got 2 days, 21 minutes, and I've died 76 times. That'll make sense a little bit, but first I want to kind of go over my passive skill tree and explain that, so let's go over that real quick. As far as keystones, I think these are like the best ones to get, or whatever they're called. The Ascendancy notables. These are the ones you want. Now the order that you want them in, first off, you want Nature's Reprisal, I believe, as your first node, simply for the final text, line of text, but let's just go from top down to keep it understandable. So the very first line of text, I actually don't think really applies to the skill, so kind of forget it. Second line of text, 15% more chaos damage is really great. Poisonous Concoction is an attack skill, so it's just 15% more damage. Amazing. And then the very last node, getting that 30% AoE is very, very important for good overlap. So as your first lab, this is the one that I recommend. Now as your second lab, this might be controversial. Some people might have a different opinion on this. I just personally believe that you should pick up Nature's Boon as your cruel lab, because around level 60, you're going to want to be running a Divine Life Flask and only really be running one. So you really want the life, or you just want the flask recovery and the chance to not consume charges. On top of that, you want to be running 4 utility flasks at that point as well, so just getting more charges on those, having more utility flask uptime is going to be really nice. It'll allow you to run bismuth flask for elemental resistances if you need it early on in the league. Just having a nice quicksilver up all the time, silver life flask, potentially even unique life flask or unique flasks as I have in my build. I just think it's necessary, so highly recommend getting that for your crew lab. And for Merc lab, I think you have to get this because you really want the poison proliferation, and then obviously the 20% chance to deal 100% more damage is amazing. So I think that you need this. And then unfortunately the last node is Nature's Adrenaline, which is such a nice node, and I did pick this up for my crew lab, but I heavily regretted not having flask sustain, and that's why I'm recommending people to grab this. If you personally don't feel the need for it, if you've never played a Pathfinder, all right, let's just take a step back, all right? Let me just say this. If you've never played a Pathfinder, take this as your second node, and you'll probably understand why. If you have never played if you have played a Pathfinder and you don't think that it is necessary, then go ahead and take whatever node you think is better. But if you've never played Pathfinder, I highly recommend this. Even if you have played Pathfinder, I recommend this over the other ones, okay? So just know that. So this is my passive skill tree. I'll just quickly show it, and then I'll show my gear. This is my gear. A lot of it's rares. I'm going to start off with my gloves because I kind of built around them in some sense, or I decided to ignore certain aspects of character building that I didn't really understand as being necessary until now. One thing I should also note is I took a long break from Path of Exile for about a year, but I do have multiple level 100 characters and multiple characters that I've taken past level 90, and I have a good understanding of chaos damage over time builds and a lot of mechanics within the game. I've just missed like the last 9 months of a year, but I've kept up to date with some stuff. Okay, so the first item that I have here is Null and Void, which are a unique pair of gloves that I happened to pick up at level 65 pretty early on. And I just saw that they had Rampage and High Life. I knew that. And then I saw some of the other effects. I'm like, oh, they seem pretty good. Some strength on them, why not? Slapped them on, and they actually are pretty nice as early leveling items, or just early items in general. I can highly recommend this in the build. It solves a lot of issues early on when first starting out in league starting or solo self-founding with the build. Obviously, if you're solo self-found, you don't just have the luxury of just getting null and void when you want, but something to keep in mind as a good glove option that covers some issues with the build, namely ailment avoidance and physical damage reduction starting out early on in the league. Okay, so with that being said, I'm going to go over the next unique item that I have, which is Circle of Nostalgia, which is a unique ring obtained in synthesized maps. I think unique ones that you can get from Atlas missions, and I'm sure that there's other ways to obtain them. I think they're called augmented distant memory maps. And I don't know exactly where they drop from, but I just know that they come from there, okay? So I happen to get one that has chaos damage, or increased chaos damage while affected by Herald of Agony, and chaos resistance while affected by Herald of Agony, which I went out and purchased for 40 chaos on day 2 of the league, which is not entirely necessary, but I liked the effects that it gave, and I thought that it would be a nice item to kind of have a baseline to build around, you know, have high chaos resist and some damage straight off the bat. So those are the unique items. So let's start then, I guess, with my chess piece, which is very embarrassing to say. And no, you're not seeing things. It does have 7 life. This is something that I got on day 2 of the league, and just, I'm pretty sure I threw like a chance orb on it or something stupid. And it ended up with this, so I just went with it. It might have actually been something I got day 1. And the fact that it just had high resistances and was a 5-link, I was pretty much fine with it at the time. And honestly, even now, even though it lacks life, I think was pretty good for day 2. I don't really regret it. And my 5-link setup is Poisonous Concoction, Greater Volley, Greater Multiple Projectiles, Unbound Ailment Support, and Cruelty. I don't think Cruelty is the best, and I'll talk about gem links a little bit later on in the video, but if you can, don't run Cruelty, and instead run Void Manipulation. Okay. Next off, I'll go with my helmet, which was also an item that I just actually found, but then realized that it was pretty good for my build, so I took it out of sale and just threw it on. It had intelligence, which the build struggles with currently, and some resistances, and it was on an evasion base as well, so why not, you know? The next item I'll show, I guess, is my boots, which were also something that I found, and the only item that I really found that isn't kind of terrible and kind of acceptable at this point. It has really high life and high movement speed and a little bit of chaos res, a little bit of fire res. Good boot. Can't really complain. And then on day 2, I actually made this Stygian vise, which has life and some resists. I bought an item level 84 Stygian, and then I scoured it and bought 4 catalysts for resistance modifiers, and then I think I spammed essences for chaos resistance. And I think that might have been how I also got my chess piece, is through essences. I'm not sure which essence I used though. I also happened to find my ring on day 2 from a ritual. So it just has some nice life and resistances as well as minus mana cost, so that was nice. This is an amulet that I purchased on day 2, I believe, that just has attributes and chaos res and life. As you can see, pretty much no damage on any of my gear. Also has attributes that I desperately need. And this was a shield I bought on day 2 just to shore up resistances, and it's a pretty decent item. Has some attack speed on it too, and high life and evasion. Not a bad item. My flasks. I have Quicksilver with some freeze avoidance so that I don't just get frozen all the time. With this flask and this, I think I'm pretty much immune. A decent little silver flask that I got earlier today. Divine flask that I got on day 1 or day 2. I think day 2. I think I went out and bought a base on day 2. But I pretty much had the same thing on like a slightly less divine flask. I think it didn't have quality and maybe had a lesser prefix anyway. And then on day 2, I also got a Witchfire brew, and today I started experimenting with overflowing chalice because I like the flask. I always have, and I know it's a cheap alternative to like what's it called? The other silver flask. It's on the tip of my tongue, but it's really expensive, so I don't have it. As you can see, I have Omega budget gear. I'll show my cluster jewels because they're not very good. I don't even have 3 notable large. Ideally, I'm not sure exactly what are the... Yeah, so I think the best notables would be Wicked Paul, Unholy Grace,
I'm not up to that
and the
just yet.
Stun Avoidance, which I think you can roll all together, right? I don't know if I have it. I think I sold all of them, but there's one that gives you Stun Avoidance. Unwavering Evil, which I do believe is a prefix. So if I were to get a large cluster, I think that would be what I would get. If you want, you can drop Wicked Paul for Unspeakable Gifts, but that's going to be really expensive and also really, really hard to obtain. You could also not really care about one of the notables if you want to, but I do think you want 3 notables ideally. It's just the best way to spec. But this is how I happen to be spec'd currently. Again, not ideal. Cannot recommend. Now my medium clusters, I just really wanted to get Circling Oblivion. So that's what I have, and then the other ones are basically just whatever I could find at the time, which I believe these were both self-crafted. And then I have this node because I was interested in experimenting with it, but it's really not necessary for my build right now. It's honestly just a waste of skill points. But I wanted to test it, and then I have some rare jewels. This one's alright, just has some damage. Same thing with this. This one's actually a lot better though. I'll link the path of buildings and the skill trees. The only things that I'll note right now is that these nodes are pretty much necessary for leech. They're the only reason why I'm taking them. I don't know what are the best masteries. I just recently swapped off of the poisons inflict deal 300% increased damage. I was not using the poison duration. I do like the Plague Bearer mastery because I'm clearing maps mostly with Plague Bearer. However, I don't think it's going to be the best in endgame, and it's something that you should only probably use while leveling, and once you start to get into red maps, you should probably spec into poison duration, and either the poisons inflict on non-poison is 300% increased damage, or the damage deal faster. I'm not sure. I'm going to test all the masteries, but I've not tested all of them and really got a good feel of how they go. This mastery is really important for Grace Reservation efficiency. There's a lot of mana issues with this build, especially if you don't have an Eldritch Battery, which I don't currently. It's something that I want to change. I currently have this mastery, but the effect of Withered is also really good. The only reason why I don't have it right now is I don't have Divergent Poisonous Concoction, so I'm not so sure how good it is. And I also don't have Awakened GMP, which makes the effect of Withered a little bit better when you have Awakened GMP and Poisonous Concoction. Okay, so I think that's really all that you need to know about the skill tree. I will say that I don't believe that the life sustained mastery that a lot of people take is necessary. I've been playing perfectly fine without it, and I haven't noticed any... Oh wait, actually I have this though. I do have this. So I do have this mastery, but I don't have these nodes. So I don't think that this wheel is necessary, but maybe having some form of life charge gaining is, like, maybe this node is actually pretty good and maybe has some scaling with other things, right? Like with increased charges gained, something I haven't tested. And then I'm still spec'd down here, but in all honesty, I think that a lot of people shouldn't spec the way I am and just drop all of this down here and spend their skill points elsewhere if possible. Like, I don't know. Anyway, I don't think the way that I'm spec'd is ideal. It just is the way that I'm spec'd. Everything about my character right now is a mistake, but I'm taking this shitty gear as far as it will take me, which is up into T15 maps where I'm starting to hit a wall, mostly due to the lack of defenses in the build. Really not a lack of damage. The damage still feels pretty damn good. It's not the best in the game. Seismic Trap would definitely outperform it, but it's going to have a lot less clear than what the build currently has. Unfortunately, my computer is literally a toaster. I'm like dropping frames in
I'm
hideout.
not up to that just
You can
yet.
probably tell by the recording it's
Salah.
not very good. So I'm just not going to show you a showcase because it's just not going to be good. And I apologize for that. I just don't have the hardware. But I wanted to share because I'm passionate about my build and sharing. So that's what we're doing. All right. I got a little bit lost there. So what I plan on transitioning into is a frenzy stacking character that uses replica Feral's Fur, which is a quite expensive item. It cost me 8 divines. I would recommend getting it as early as you can in the league. It only goes up in price. So if you can get this on like day 2, day 3, you should try to if you want to mimic what I'm building. Because even if, at worst, if you don't end up getting or wanting to use it or liking this certain variant or whatever, you don't want it, it's only going to gain value unless something changes. This item has only gone up in price as leagues go on, or as the league duration goes on. So try to get it as early as you can if possible. It's a good currency sink. Okay. Anyway, I got it a little bit later. I got it for 8 divines when you probably get it for 6. And the main reason why you need this item is it grants you maximum frenzy and endurance charges when you gain cat's agility. And you gain cat's agility basically, you gain it every, it's kind of hard to explain because it has to deal with aspect of the cat. So if you know what aspect of the cat is, it's easier to explain. And I honestly don't know how long it lasts base duration-wise generally. So I don't know how this actually fully works, and something that I'm gonna have to experiment with, like with frenzy charge duration and endurance charge duration, to figure out how I can maintain frenzy charges with the build comfortably, and same thing with endurance charges. On top of that, you have onslaught while you have cat's agility, which again I think is like 60 or 50% uptime, which is really nice. Cat's agility gives you some extra speed and gives you, I think that's it actually. Oh, but when you gain cat's agility, you're going to get onslaught, which is also amazing. So there's that. All right. The next part of the build is snakebite. These gloves grant attack speed per frenzy charge, some nice life, as well as accuracy rating per frenzy charge, which is very nice because the build struggles with accuracy. You're still an attack build. You're still not resolute technique, so you still need to fix accuracy. As well as you get some chance to poison, which I'll show in the endgame tree does matter. So it does cap out your poison chance and allows you to free up some skill points potentially. And it also grants you damage over time multiplier per frenzy charge, which is really nice. And in the build, we're looking at upwards of 8 frenzy charges right now, possibly 9, even 10, maybe even more. I'm not sure what's entirely possible, right? You could stack a lot of frenzies. It all depends on how you want to build. But I expect my endgame variant will have 7 to 9 frenzies, and I don't expect to have more than that. Now I'm going to show kind of what I'm transitioning into. I'm going to quickly show you the tree. It uses a lot of unique jewels. Don't get too overwhelmed. All right, here are the items. Obviously, everything's super min-maxed and isn't realistic of what I'm going to immediately swap into, but kind of an idea of what the end game is going to look like. So one thing I don't currently have that I will likely get tomorrow, but I also don't think is necessary to start the build and technically isn't necessary for that core aspect of the build, which I would say is just the Feral's Fur and the snake bites. is Devouring Diadem. Has really good stuff, has +1 level of socketed gems, which is great. It affects your Lighten as well as the gems that you socket inside of the helmet. You get Reservation Efficiency, which allows you to reserve a lot more things. Feast of Flesh, which is great for sustain and also sustains or consumes corpses. Some Energy Shield to support the fact that this helmet grants Eldritch Battery, as well as a chance to begin Energy Shield recharge when you use a skill. So again, for sustaining your own basically mana, because you're Eldritch Battery. And the very last thing that is a variable on a Devouring Diadem and also very important is the duration of ailments you inflict while focused. It's a little bit interactive. You do have to press focus when you want to do like single target damage. But that's what that is for. Then we went over these, right? You guys know Feral's Fur. One thing I didn't say with the Snakebite is that you can get implicit modifiers through corrupting them. Most importantly, 1 maximum frenzy charge. But there's some other things like Cursed with Despair on hit and Tempt Chains on hit, as well as like plus level of gems, plus level of AoE gems that could be very, very useful on Snakebites. So I'm going to see what I end up using and build around it. Next, we have Dark Ray Vectors, which I think are going to be a nice, cheap starter boot. However, I think transitioning into influenced or possibly even double influenced boots in the end game is going to be way better. But is a great starter boot where, again, you can get implicit mods very easily and possibly double implicits. +1 maximum endurance charge along with maybe AoE gems or there's some other modifiers. You can get movement speed implicit. I think you can get maybe even like maximum fire res. Let's see. There's some cool stuff. Spell suppression apparently. Yeah, there's some cool stuff here, you know. Anyway, there's some cool double corrupts you can do that I think will be fun. I think I'll go over all the unique items first real quick. There's a Circle of Nostalgia in the build, which I think is great. And one thing to note about Circle of Nostalgia is you can actually get +1 maximum frenzy charge on it, which is what I'm going to aim for in the very end game, but I don't think is necessary. Again, that is probably something that you would get as your very, very last upgrade or something, because the cost to what you get I don't think is going to be all that worth it. This build is running a Overflowing Chalice, which I don't think is entirely necessary. You can also run Bottled Faith if you want big damage, but I think early on when I first transition, I'm going to keep this Overflowing Chalice, test using it, test using some other stuff, see how it goes. Bottled Faith is going to be best in slot for damage, no doubt about it. If you want highest damage, get a Bottled Faith. Overflowing Chalice might be really nice for Flask Sustain, and this is something I'm going to test, all right? And then there's a bunch of unique jewels, which I won't go over for now. I'll go over them on the skill tree. I think that's about it. I think I'm just going to go over the skill tree now. Yeah, let's just go over the skill tree. So in the build, we're pathing to all of the frenzy charges, which means that we're pretty stretched and that you want to find high efficiency out of stretching your build. I like to do that through getting jewels usually. I find that that's the most effective way. There's a lot of really powerful unique jewels. However, everybody knows that this means that your build's going to be kind of expensive. It's going to be wonky as well. It's going to be weird to put together. It's going to take a while. It's not going to be that good, and it's going to be, again, extremely expensive. This variant of the build already is looking at like 60 divines minimum. So just know that before I go into this, but also know that I have other things that I'm going to link and show. So I don't know, there's just not much to worry about. Just go along with the ride. Don't click off yet if you're all worried about the end game. I just kind of want to show it. I have it prepared for here, and I don't really want to go through the mid game because those other builds, I'm not going to be doing those other builds. I want to show this, and then I'll give you the option to see other Poisonous Concoction builds if you're interested as well. So, where should we start? Again, we have all the same Ascendancy nodes. And one thing you'll see here on the path of building is that we do have Avatar Slaughter, which is granted by the unique jewels Forbidden Flesh and Forbidden Flame. We run a few other unique jewels in the build that I think are extremely good. Unnatural Instinct being one of them, as well as Impossible Escape. Again, as you are seeing, these are very expensive jewels. Watcher's Eye. The build that I have imported from somebody else's build actually has a Watcher's Eye that I don't think is ideal, and there's some things about the build that I think aren't the best and that I plan on changing. So anyway, I'll show you that and some other options. And I guess I'm just going to kind of go over almost everything about the tree at this point. So if you want to skip ahead, I'm sure I'll put some timestamps. And yeah. So here I have Unnatural Instinct because it grants, or it actually affects these small nodes here, which are all pretty good, and you don't have to actually spec them. So you get like Chaos Res and some Frenzy Charge Duration and Accuracy and Life, as well as some Life and Energy Shield on Kill, which is kind of nice for sustaining in maps. And we end up getting these nodes basically because they're just good. Just know that all these nodes and all of the masteries are pretty much tried and true best in slot. The only one that I think is maybe not better is this effect of Withered, because I don't know for sure that we can maintain 20 Wither stacks the way I have it set up. I don't know how many Wither stacks this build is realistically going to have. So a safer option might be this one, but I think the end game possibility of effective Withered is higher. So we'll see. I won't go over too much more of it, but yeah, we pick up jewels, we get good notables. Everything here is good. There is nothing but good stuff. One thing that is, I guess, kind of worth noting is I do not know what is the best poison mastery, and something that I'm not going to have to experiment with. I don't know if it's this mastery or this one or this one. I don't think that Plague Bearer maximum value is going to be the best on the build. I find that Plague Bearer clears fine regardless of if you have the maximum value or not. So my assumption is that Poison Duration is going to be the best, and that if it isn't Poison Duration, it's going to be this node. There's a small chance that this node is interesting. It does have the highest... Sorry, one second. I'm going to take a drink of water.
Mic off. Mic on.
Just so you know, sorry, just so you know, that's a program I have for my headphones, so don't be creeped out. Anyway, don't know what the best one is. My assumption, this one's going to be safe to go with, but the other ones could be really good. And that the, obviously, if you compare the damage per second, this one has the highest. So it all depends on a few things. There's other ways that you can get poisons deal damage faster. I'm not sure what's going to be the best mastery. I come down and I get this notable here for Natural Remedies, which I really like, because it gets once a flask effect duration and flask effectiveness, as well as remove maim and hinder, which are a little bit more common nowadays than like a year or two ago. So it's not completely useless. Then we grab this node here to get some spell suppression, which I would like to cap on this build, and I also think is very possible. We pick up Thick Skin just to get life, but I also think that there's some interesting things with getting ailment immune here, because this is 20% right here. And I'll show you some other ailment avoidances that we can easily acquire in the build, and then starts to seem like, man, maybe we should just get ailment immune. And I haven't fully explained, or I've not fully explored avoiding ailment options. So I'm going to show you some that I know of and then try to build off of that. All right, now we get to the cluster jewel. This is a pretty good cluster. I think the way that this guy was speccing, he wasn't getting this in the back, but I do think that you want to get a 3 notable, 8 passive chaos damage cluster. One second, I'm gonna check this. Okay, sorry, it's a small trait, just small trait. Not crazy. He moved on. Yeah, you want to get an 8 passive large chaos damage cluster. As far as the notables, I think you really want to have Unwavering Evil and Wicked Paul as your prefixes. And then for your suffix, Unholy Grace or Unspeakable Gifts. Unspeakable Gifts gives like 10% chance to explode, which could be pretty nice, but it's only 10% chance. And I've had only one explodey jewel before, and it's pretty underwhelming. That'll note. Like if you have no other chances to explode, that 10% feels like nothing. So just know that I don't think that it's honestly that worth it, or that it's consistent enough to really change the way that your build's going to feel and function and play. So you should probably just get Unholy Grace because it gives more DPS. Okay. And then for medium clusters, I think that ideally, these are like the best medium notables you can get, Circling Oblivion and Student of Decay. There are some other options for medium clusters here. You might want to get some sort of attack leech. I'm not sure. Again, I haven't fully explored other medium cluster options. But if we're talking raw DPS and just overall value, these are the best notables. And obviously here, Forbidden Flame Jewels, we went over that earlier. We end up getting Dirty Techniques here. I'm actually going to unspec this jewel so that it doesn't confuse people that don't know. So we get Dirty Techniques. Grants a ton of damage. If I unspec this, total DPS 3.4 per point is actually quite a lot. But might not be entirely necessary. It depends on a few things. So we'll see. This one might not be entirely necessary. The biggest thing is that this jewel gets affected by Brutal Restraint. And we'll go over that in a bit, but I just want to show the nodes themselves first for anybody that might be slightly confused. I know this build's already getting kind of crazy, but I'm going to try to keep it as simple as I can. So we get obviously another Frenzy here. I'm thinking about getting an Endurance charge, but I don't think I'll get this unless I think it's necessary early on. I will absolutely get Golem's Blood. Absolutely, I'm going to get Adamant here. This node is really necessary for getting the Determination Reservation Efficiency, but has some other really good stuff with guard skills, which I'll go over in a sec. And then we get Disciple of Slaughter, obviously, for incredible damage, as well as the nodes leading up to them grant an insane amount of damage as well. So there's that. And then we pick up this node here for block chance, block recovery, and some life recovery on block. However, I don't know how necessary this is with some other variants of the build that I'm kind of thinking of. So there's a few things to note. This notable, I think, is interesting as an early on notable to get attack block chance and spell block chance like high with very low investment, right? Just getting high block with very, very small investment in your character. However, I think obtaining spell suppression cap on this character won't be too hard. And that if I'm getting spell suppression cap, should I still block spells? That's one, like those are defensive layers that I don't know how well they work together or if it's kind of not worth it. Whereas you could possibly get this here, get ailment avoidance here, and just kind of be okay with having high block. Which I think is likely the best way to run the build. Now, we'll start to complicate things with the forbidden, or the brutal restraint, which makes me not want to come over here and get these DPS nodes, only because the build is Omega point starved, and that I don't really need damage here, and that I could do with instead getting damage through notables here, and then this becomes 4% damage per point, and this is only 3.8. Now, I guess it depends if we're speccing at this point. So yeah, anyway, it's showing that this is better. All right. That's all I'm saying, is that it's really showing that these nodes are really good. Abusing brutal restraint and the fact that there's a lot of really efficient nodes here, and the possibilities here are crazy. I'll show some examples from this jewel. So this one has, you have the possibility on any of these notables to have any of these that are within the radius, right? So you increase damage with poison, chance to gain onslaught on kill, which can be nice because you're not going to have permanent onslaught even though you have the chess piece. So this could be nice when mapping, you know, could be valuable. It's a notable worth noting. On adamant here, as you can see, this one just happens to have Alchemist Genius. This notable, or Alchemist Genius, is really, really good. If I can find it. Grants 10% flask effect and 20% charges gained. I mean, come on. Your Pathfinder. You need that. Yo, I was rambling way too damn much. I decided to cut ahead. This website here, UE.ninja. I love this website. There's tons of things you can do on it. This isn't going to be a guide. I just want to show you website. If you didn't know before, now you know. What I like to do is I like to go here to builds, find inspiration. In this situation, I'm going to be looking at a previous league. Sometimes you can look at your current league, a previous league, a hardcore league, whatever you want to do. Wherever you want to find inspiration from, you do that. Anyway, in this situation, obviously we're playing Poisonous Concoction as a Pathfinder, so I'm going to go here, and then I typically like to look at the highest DPS builds, which I'm going to show you guys now so you guys can have an idea of like how damage scales, which I think is really important when you're looking at your build, but also understanding that the highest DPS build for a reason. Look at its life pool. We're going to look at some of its defenses. So anyway, let's just go ahead. I opened up all 4 of the top DPS builds. There's some common things I found. They were all using Devouring Diadem, the Covenant, and Ascendancy Gentle Touch. So that seems like a pretty decent recipe for a character. One of them happened to not be using Mage Blood and was still top 2 DPS, so figured I'd open up that build, see what makes, you know, Poisonous Concoction scale the best. You'll see he's running Brutal Restraint. We already know about that, right? And anyway, on his notables, he happens to have a lot of increased damage with poison on them. You can kind of assume that those notables are pretty good. Scaling damage. He's also running 2 large 8 passive, 3 notable cluster jewels, and scaling a lot through medium clusters by using the Steady Torment Circling Oblivion combination. Now normally you can't really make use of this, but he is running a jewel here called the Siege, which grants kineticism. Kineticism grants you attack projectiles always inflict bleeding and maim, and knock back enemies, as well as the downside that it doesn't affect our build. So by doing that, you get really, really good medium cluster notables for pretty small investment. But the reason why I didn't really implement this into my build was simply that, as you saw, I was really, really struggling for jewel slots. And I don't think that it's as good as just scaling some of the other things instead, because there's always trade-offs. So anyways, these are some of the recipes for the highest damage builds. Again, not all of it's set in stone. Look around at different builds, not just the highest DPS ones. See what ideas are common, what works. I just figured I'd show you guys that, and I'm going to show up the configuration screen here so you know I'm not doing any sort of crazy bullshit. Probably the only thing that's unfair that I'm doing here is that he's focused, which does grant a lot of damage, so you know it's like 10 million DPS. I think everything else is actually pretty reasonable from what I understand. Anyway, that's that. I appreciate you guys all watching. If you enjoyed the video, please drop a like. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them in the comment section. I'll try to make more videos, more logs, so please subscribe. And once again, thank you so much for watching. Peace out.